right, everyone. How's everyone doing? Today I'm going to go over how to solve one-step equations using all four operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So let's do this. Equivalent equations, right? So basically what an equivalent equation means is if you add, subtract, multiply, or divide anything by the same thing on both sides of an equation, then the resulting equation is equivalent, kind of like a scale, right? If I were to add something, let's say a little block right here, and I add the same exact block to the other side, the scale would stay equal. If I added it to one side and not the other, then that would not happen. So let me give you a couple examples of what this would look like, right? Say I have two things that are the same. Let's say A and B, right? A and B are just two different variables. If I were to add C to the one side, if I add C to the other side, that equation remains equivalent, right? These two equations are exactly the same thing. They tell you exactly the same thing. If I subtract something, I have to subtract it from the other side. If I multiply something, I have to multiply it to the other side. And finally, if I divide it, I can divide by the other side as long as C is not 0, right? I can't divide by 0 on both sides of an equation. All right, so let's take a look at this, right? Let's do some examples to help us practice this. We're going to solve each of these equations, right, using either addition or subtraction, right? We're going to try to break this up into two different sections. So if we take a look at this first equation, there's really two ways you can write this out, right? If I want to look at an equation like a scale, I have to kind of draw the top of the scale down the middle, right? And that kind of gives me two sides of this equation. The left side, which is x minus 3, and the right side, which is negative 5. If I want to get rid of that and I want to solve for the variable, so basically when it says solve each equation, it means for the variable. So we want to get x by itself. Just x equals something. Okay, so if I do that, right now I want to get rid of this. This is really a negative 3 there. So in order to get rid of that negative 3, I have to add 3 to both sides. If I add 3 to both sides, that 3 becomes 0. Negative 3 and positive 3 becomes 0. And I have x equals negative 2. So I have the format I wanted. I have x equals negative 2. So that would be my solution. You'll see a lot of some books do it a different way, or some of your teachers might do it a different way, where they might write it out like this: x minus 3, I'm just going to add a 3 right here. And if I do the same thing to the other side, negative 5 plus 3. So really what they're doing, that minus 3 that I put underneath, they're just adding it to the end here instead, right? It really means the same thing. That's going to cancel out there, and I can combine those two. So let me switch back to red. And we have x equals, once again, negative 5 plus 3. If you can put that right in your calculator that way, and you get negative 2 as well. They gave you the same exact solution. So it's your choice, this one or that one. Okay, let's do the other one real quick because this is very similar but very different at the same time, right? I want to take a look at this. I'm going to subtract to 0.8 that time, right? We're dealing with decimals, but not a big deal. Our calculator can handle that. Okay, and if I subtract negative 2 on both, negative 2.8 on both sides, then I have to do it on the other side, just like my equivalent equations property says, right? So I have to cancel that out, and I'll be left with y equals, if I do that, I believe we get negative 1.9. Okay? So, we also have to make sure we check our equations after we're done. So after we get our answers, does negative 2 work here, right? If I say negative 2 minus 3, does that equal negative 5? Yes, indeed it does. So therefore, our solution we found was correct. And over here, once again, if I do the same thing, does 0.9 equal negative 1.9 plus 2.8? And yes, it does. If I do that, 0.9 does equal 0.9. All right, so let me scroll down here real quick. And I want you to go ahead and try these real quick. Go ahead and pause the video. So if you got n equals negative 10 for the first one, you got g equals negative 1/3 for the second one, and p equals 10.4, then you did those correctly. If you did those incorrectly, make sure you talk to your teacher or your tutor and make sure you go over the steps in the process. There are some fractions and decimals in there, so there might have just been a little mistake in your math there. All right. And finally, let's go over how to do this with multiplication and division. So real quick, this first one's a little tricky. It's probably the trickiest one out of all three of these right here. So remember, if I have a negative out front of a fraction, I can actually choose to put the negative up top or up bottom, but it's not on both, right? If it was on top and bottom, negative divided by a negative would be a positive, correct? So I can make a choice. Do I want to make the n positive or the not positive, negative? And I'm going to make the 5 negative. The reason for that is because I can actually multiply or divide by a negative number. Okay, so if I take a look at this right now, currently what I'm doing here, the fraction bar means division. So I can just multiply both sides by negative 5. Once again, that's the thing I'm doing on both sides. And if I take a look at that and that one, right, I'm doing the multiplication on both sides, that's going to cancel that out. And I'm going to be left with n equals negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. All right, let's slide over to the next one. Once again, I can break these down through that equal sign to make sure I'm doing it on both sides at the same time, right? Hence the negative 5 on the last one. So in this case, my x is the variable. For anyone who doesn't know what pi is, right? Pi is just a number. It's estimated about 3.14. So therefore, I can treat it like a number. So the main variable I'm trying to solve for still is x. So if I wanted to get x by itself, right now, x and pi, if there's two variables or numbers and a number and a variable right next to each other, that means multiplication. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide by pi. And I get left with x by itself over here. And once again, pi divided by pi is just 1. And I'm just left with negative 2. So once again, it's just like canceling out a number. And finally, the last one, once again, if a number and a variable are right next to each other, that is multiplication. So I can divide again on both sides of this. Once again, if I do it on the left side, I have to also do it to the right side. The 1.3 cancels out. I'm left with that. And 5.2 divided by 1.3 actually ends out nice. It ends out to be 4. Once again, you can do that in your calculator if you're not sure how to do that. And let's make sure that we can check these equations to make sure our solutions are correct. So we have negative 15 over 5. Does that equal negative 3? If you do that in your calculator, it does. The next one, we have pi times negative 2. Does that equal negative 2 pi? Yes, it does. It's just the same thing, just written in reverse order. And the last one, 1.3 times 4. If you do that in your calculator, it does indeed equal 5.2. And last but not least, let's see if you can do these problems. So go ahead and pause the video and try to see if you can do these. And if you got y equals negative 18, x equals 9, and w equals 28 for these last problems, then you did do this correctly. Great job. Once again, if you did not, please make sure you talk to your teacher or your tutor. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe for additional content coming up. Thanks.